Hello and welcome to the PorgCast. I am your host, Porg1, and with
I,
me is my co-host.
Porg 2.
All right. This is our first actual podcast. I guess where do we want to start but to kind of give a little background of what we want to do and going forward of what we want to build from this.
The basic premise is just two Porgs casually discussing Star Wars without screeching on about which trilogy was good and which one sucked, and not
Just
claiming that one director is a devil incarnate. We do not stand for bigotry or cyberbullying.
We just want to remain positive. We're a PorgCast. Just as fun to listen to as actual Porgs.
Although we probably don't taste as good.
We're just building this as we go along.
Yeah. So, where should we go for the first discussion topic? Something casual, but Star Wars related.
I mean, obviously. I guess something a little bit more laid back. Useless facts. How about that? Everyone loves trivia. I remember we were talking the other day. What was it? There was like an hour-long conversation at Cello's about the population density of Coruscant.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into that? Because I don't remember like a tenth of anything you talked about.
Actually, the population discussion first came up in the form of texts, where basically what I did was I pointed out that for the population that we canonically get for Coruscant, which is about 2 trillion, and the surface area of the planet that we're given, thank you, Wikipedia, Coruscant would only have a population density equivalent to that of, like, Miami.
Get out your pens and papers, kids.
Oh, man, I did the math so long ago, though, because I don't have all my calculations with me. Just simply saying, though, is that a trillion is a scary big number by our standards. But we also have to remember that not every single square inch of Earth is covered in city. And, we still have oceans and ice caps left. While Coruscant, if I recall correctly, doesn't even have... It has, like, what, a lake left?
I think it has like a mountain, but even then it's like held very sacred, but it's like so mediocre and small. It's like going to a public park and staring at grass.
Yeah, but and then if you go by legends, even the mountains didn't stay after because the Yuuzhan Vong literally blew up the mountains.
Yeah.
So they don't even get that. But yeah, that's the thing with scale, where we kind of forget just how big a thing a planet is, and how densely we can fill in with people, so to say. Where it's like 1 trillion, yeah, you could comfortably fit that on a planet if you have all the surface area available.
And probably
so, I'm like, Coruscant, that would be hellish, though. Can you just imagine a planet that just looked like Miami no matter where you went on it?
I mean, also, because a trillion would probably be what lives on there. Never mind the fact that...
2 trillion, I think.
2 trillion. Never mind the fact that I think you're the one that said it's a city planet. So people go there to work and then go home to their wherever else they came from. So it's like going into the capital or the city for a day and then heading back to your house.
Yeah, well, but that also begs the question of because if you go by the legends numbers, even then that only brings it up to an extra few trillion, which is not that. It's still not that much more dense than real life Earth cities. Let me see if I can pull up what I told you about the population density of
it's over 1 trillion and over 50% human.
Well, of course, the real reason why it's 50% humans is because it's a lot cheaper to do humans than it is other aliens.
That's fair.
And also because humans are much more easy to readily emphasize with, unless, of course, you make the aliens really freaking cute, as Baby Yoda had shown.
Or Porgs.
I don't know, Porgs haven't gotten that much of a
I mean, before Baby Yoda, there were the plushies that you always saw at the Disney store.
Well, I don't go to Disney specific stores.
Oh,
But yeah, I mean,
you're
like,
missing out.
Porgs didn't take off as big as people probably were expecting. But I don't know. Well, they weren't trying too hard with them either. It was like a little joke because of the filming production, where it's like they got all these freaking puffins that they got to get rid of. So you can just make them into aliens and then include them as like a little funny bit. I'm pretty sure Disney. I wouldn't be surprised if Disney didn't know about the Porg thing until later on. They're like, we can market this.
I don't know. I feel like Disney is extremely good at knowing what cute is.
Yeah, but Disney also sometimes messes up. Like, remember how long it took for people to get anything like merchandise related to Baby Yoda because Disney wasn't expecting Baby Yoda to take off?
Really? I feel like they had that. I feel like they had that stuff like right off the bat.
No, no. My brother Chris's friend, he went nuts over Baby Yoda, and he was complaining about how apparently it was going to take months for Disney to start manufacturing and selling Baby Yoda merchandise because they weren't expecting it to take off.
Oh yes, you're right. You're right.
Anyway, I found the calculations that I had done for you. Not the actual hard math, but
I mean, go for it.
So I said that if we go by the canon example of 2 trillion people, Coruscant would have a population density lower than that of Miami because some cities are literally 6 times as dense as Miami. And
So what's like the average distance it would be between a person?
I believe Miami's population density, from what I had read, is like 4,000 people in every square kilometer.
Oh, geez. What'd you get for Coruscant? If it was lower?
It was a little bit lower. But
Did you
going back to it, also, I said, for example, if Coruscant had the population density of Dharavi, a slum located in the city of Mumbai in India, that if you had given it that population density, there would be 130 trillion people in Coruscant.
Oh, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That
was your reaction when I texted you about that all those weeks ago. You were like, "Do you mean billion?" And I was like, "No." And the thing is, like, Coruscant, the way it's depicted in the media, like, it would have a much higher population density than how the math actually plays out. Because it seems like no matter where you go on that planet, from what we've seen, it's nothing but mile-high skyscrapers. And skyscrapers are like...
And speeders.
Yeah, not just... Well, yeah, but I'm thinking more about the living spaces. Skyscrapers are like the ultimate way of increasing an area's population density, right?
Yeah.
So just imagine, like, most... Like, first off, Earth is not covered in skyscrapers, right?
No.
And our skyscrapers do not get that tall. Not at all. Like,
what's the tallest skyscraper on Coruscant?
I think they said that the tallest things in Coruscant literally get to like 10 kilometers high.
Oh, I've got it right here. At its highest level, Galactic City's skyscrapers were built with many reaching 6,000 meters into the atmosphere.
6 kilometers. So okay. More than 2 miles high.
What's the Empire State Building?
Empire State Building. The world's tallest building doesn't even reach 1 kilometer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
But, like, yeah, like, actually thinking about that, it's really crazy to think about. Because, yeah, modern skyscrapers, which are much smaller than what we see in Star Wars, can hold like a single skyscraper can hold like tens of thousands of people in it. You can fit the population of like a small town in there, and they're not a mile high.
Yeah.
So then it just kind of begs the question of like, where is everybody? Like, if you had a city that like built that high up and you had it spread out across an entire planet, which is almost exactly the same size of Earth, like the question becomes like, who are you going to find to talk to?
Yeah. I mean, it's like still like 2 trillion people versus what are we at now for like over 8 billion on Earth?
was still 7 billion, almost 8.
Okay.
But
I mean,
as the inspiration for Coruscant, the city planet of Trantor in the Foundation series had a similar problem. Actually, it was much worse than Coruscant because at least Coruscant goes into the trillions. Trantor, which was supposed to be a massive city planet, which was like the capital of that galactic empire, its population was given only as 40 billion.
yeah, so nowhere close.
If you had an entire planet covered
You
in
basically have a continent to yourself,
not a
or at
continent.
least a country. You at least have a country to yourself.
I mean, maybe not an entire country, but you would have a super mega big building to yourself.
Yeah, that's fair.
That is ridiculously sparse. We're kind of with things that alter our understanding, that lead to us thinking that 40 billion would be a densely populated planet is because of how little of our own planet's area we take up in many ways. Because while we only live in a small area of the planet, the impacts of our civilization spread a lot farther because, we don't live in farmland, but we still use farmland, right? So, 8 billion feels crowded because we have to make room for farmland and all of the transportation infrastructure and all of that. And there's still vast untamed areas, and we're also on a planet that's 70% covered in water. So you have that.
I mean, hasn't Star Wars always kind of had a little problem with scale?
A little problem. Oh my! Seriously, the lore seems to get so inconsistent that writers will try to fill in the gaps or make reasonable assumptions on the matter, and then they'll come up with numbers that are so wildly different that it doesn't jive with what we see in the movies at all.
That's kind of
in Attack of the Clones, it was a big deal that they had 1,200,000 clones, right, for the army, right? So that's the Grand Army of the Republic, meant to fight a galactic spanning civil war, right? That's smaller than the U.S. Army. That's smaller than the U.S. Army.
Oh, right.
There have been multiple armies throughout human history that had bigger numbers than that. The U.S. In World War II had 15 million people deployed, more than 10 times as much. And that's one tiny, unadvanced country on a unadvanced planet, right?
Yeah.
And then you got a whole freaking galaxy that can mass produce clone armies and have planets where the population goes into the trillions, apparently. And yet 1 million clone troopers is a good number.
The initial number was 1.2 million clones, and then millions more in development, and another 5 million were ordered during the Clone Wars. But also with how long it takes to breed them, I doubt that 5 million even can't. I think in lore they didn't even really come.
Yeah.
So it's safe to assume that the actual number of the army kind of probably peaked out around maybe 1 million, a little bit more than that.
Because you also have to take into consideration casualties.
Oh, yeah.
And then you also get the but when you talk about those kind of numbers and then you get to some people who claim that the New Republic, not the New Republic, my bad, the Galactic Republic would have, that millions of inhabited planets and then millions more of colonies. And if you're going with those kind of numbers, that means that literally you would have more planets you'd have to occupy than actual clone troopers to do the occupying. You'd have to in order to meet the occupation quotas, you would have to cut a clone trooper in half and put one torso, put his torso on one planet and put his legs on the other, and you'd still be spread thin. You'd still run out of clone troopers before you had planets.
Here's the arm of a clone trooper. Here's the leg of a clone trooper.
like
This'll defend you.
the scale of what the lore claims of like the size of the Galactic Empire and the Galactic Republic and all these other groups versus the actual numbers that we see in the movies. Like in the movies, like it was mentioned to be a big deal that they like with the Confederacy of Independent Systems, it was considered a big deal that they could get 10,000 star systems to their cause, right?
Yeah.
Which is quite a fair bit shy of millions of worlds.
I mean, the Separatists were a small occupation when you really truly think about it. I mean, even though they were like underneath everything, they were headed by Palpatine and Dooku for a very more sinister plot.
I thought, but it was a big enough conflict that it took 3 years for the New Republic, not for the Grand Army of the Republic to like actually have them on the ropes. Like at the Battle of Coruscant, like the Confederacy ships were of even number to the Republic ships.
And that was supposed to be like the last big push that they had. Like
that was everything
was more of a desperate attempt just to try to be like, all right, let's just go for it.
Because it was in that battle that they lost their head of state, and according to what I read on Wikipedia once, they lost a third of their navy.
And most of their top brass went into hiding on Utapau afterward.
Yeah, and then they lost their general, who was like the only chance of winning the war after that.
Yeah. I think Dooku especially was definitely the biggest hit. And then I think it was a few weeks between. No, because Revenge of the Sith takes place in like a week.
Really?
I think so. I think it's only like a week.
Nah, it's got to be a few weeks, at the very least. No,
I'm looking at it. Yeah, how many days did Revenge of the Sith take place? In Revenge of the Sith, there are a few clear signs of how much time has passed. The events of the film span 4 days.
Good golly.
From the Battle of Coruscant to Dooku's death, Anakin and Obi-Wan saving Palpatine also place in 1 day, with Anakin having his first Padme vision dying in childbirth that night. The second day consists of Anakin getting his assignment to spy on Palpatine and concludes with the Darth Plagueis speech. Day 3 begins with Kenobi being sent on a mission to Utapau, including Order 66, and then the 4th day ends with Anakin arriving on Mustafar, and then that 3rd day ends with Mustafar. Day 4 begins with Palpatine's Senate speech declaring the end of the Republic and concludes with Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting on Mustafar.
So are you literally telling me it only took 4 days for Anakin? It's not the Jedi way to hacking and slashing younglings.
I mean,
I thought he was gonna. I thought the visions were going on for months.
I mean, especially with the clone. I mean, with the added lore of the Clone Wars, we kind of see Anakin's turn be a little bit more gradual compared to just having Attack of the Clones to Revenge of the Sith. So, like, having the extra lore,
The Clone Wars, like, honestly, I think without that show, people's opinion of the prequels would have been a lot more sour to this day.
I think, in particular, because the visions of Padme dying are of her dying in childbirth, which he didn't get until he came back from the Outer Rim sieges when she finally told him she was pregnant.
Yeah, like that also kind of reminded me, right? I thought it's been some time since I last seen Revenge of the Sith. So I thought that okay.
Stay positive.
I was about to say, you think he would have seen her pregnant beforehand, right? I thought
no, because he was in the Outer Rim. He was in the Outer Rim sieges. He didn't see her for months.
So then, why did he need to be told that she was pregnant? You think he would have immediately seen the belly if she was 9 months in?
I mean, she was wearing big, heavy clothing. There is a part in you watched season 7, right?
I've seen bits and bobs with the show. I haven't finished any season on its own. You know how hard it is to find time to watch TV alone in the house? My mom tried watching the Clone Wars with me once, but she didn't like the animation style, so...
that's fair. But in the Bad Batch arc, Anakin gets a little time with Padme, and, like, she's visibly pregnant, but, like this is, like, the Bad Batch arc, I think, is, like, a few weeks before Revenge of the Sith, or, because... I think it's like towards the end of their Outer Rim sieges. But like in their little kind of conversation over hologram, she's visibly pregnant, but obviously Anakin doesn't realize it. I mean, anyone who's watching this can clearly see it's like, oh yeah, there's a little bit of a belly there. But I doubt he really paid attention to it.
It probably
because
was.
obviously she also didn't say anything.
If it had taken, I thought it was going to take over much more time. Especially, like I thought he would have been so much more desperate if he was having these horrible visions of her dying in childbirth for weeks and months, right? Because that's the impression I had gotten from the series.
Maybe. I mean, he could have always been having like some sort of visions, because I know Yoda was definitely like suppressed them. But I think in particular, once he found out she was pregnant, that's really when they began to spiral into more of a depression of losing her.
Although if he did want to have the visions,
because now it wasn't just losing
really
her, but losing his entire family.
I think one way he could have done it could have been like he was having these visions of her dying in childbirth even before he found out that she was pregnant. He just thought, oh, maybe these are just really far off
visions of the future.
Because very far, the more far off the prediction is, the less likely it is that that's going to happen, right? So he thinks, oh, it's just some general anxiety because one day maybe I'll start a family with Padme, and then maybe I'll have to worry about that. But that's years away. I'll be fine. And he comes back and finds out that she's pregnant for real, and she's going to be giving birth in a few days, and he's like, oh shit.
Which also begs the question, if Revenge of the Sith is in 4 days and the twins were well enough to be born at the end of those 4 days, how far off was she? I mean, clearly it was definitely
4 days off from pregnant, from giving birth.
I mean, could they have also been early? I mean, was there dying.
Was there anything they said about that?
That was just kind of my impression, the fact that they could have probably been early enough, because I mean she was dying.
Yeah, I don't know enough. Going back to the scale though, the scale problems, like that's one thing, and it gets most annoying with the scale where like it's problematic enough where it doesn't seem to jive that well with the setting at large, where it's like, oh, if you have a galaxy this big, why couldn't this Galactic Empire just casually drop, 15,000 Star Destroyers or something like that for the Battle of Endor, right?
Yeah, there being only 30.
Right? So there's that problem. And then the more annoying thing is that even though it's not by the movies, which are the primary canon, right? Where then if you have any debate about Star Wars online, nerds will immediately say, well, they probably had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of warships, and each one of those could glass a planet. Because that'd be the only. Because if you scale up to the implications, and it's like, but we're not talking about implications. We're talking about what we actually saw, right?
Yeah.
I've seen some of the most whack ass stuff being claimed, like because of like people who don't do the math right. Including people who, like, someone, like, you get tertiary canon at best for some things where it's like, oh, the visual dictionary, right?
Yeah, which I mean, but...
Or, like, visual dictionaries. And literally, like, a one-off line from one of those visual dictionaries became a big piece of ammo used by the nerds arguing online, where it's like, they claim that a Super Star Destroyer has a power output of like 3.3 to 10 to the 26th power watts, which in actuality would be literally the same power output as our sun. Where if your ship can produce that much power output, why build the Death Star?
Why build it?
Right? And the Death Star was not a casual thing. It was such an important thing that they were willing to dissolve the Imperial Senate because they thought they wouldn't need it anymore. And it was a humongous blow when they lost it. So that why would you build that thing if apparently just one single Super Star Destroyer can casually replicate those results?
would that just be like the reactor output or
Yeah.
like its firepower?
I think the actual reactor output was even higher. In order to get that kind of power, you would literally have to be annihilating millions upon millions of tons of matter and antimatter together every second, which is like, what? So no, I try to avoid the tertiary canon stuff like that because it's not just other franchises have those problems as well, where like they'll just throw in random numbers or technologies that you never see at all in the actual stories. Like
I mean, it's kind of it's just to kind of like explain stuff away and retcon stuff. I mean, that's why Legends kind of became a little bit of a mess
yeah, well, it's also not just
before it was.
retcons, but also just like stupid numbers, like or stupid technologies, like Halo as another example of that. You know, Halo claimed that the UNSC always used nuclear bomb pumped X-ray lasers against the Covenant, which is until that got mentioned in that one tertiary source, it had never been brought up before at all in any of this stuff. Even the material that the nerds worshipped as examples of like starship strength and stuff like that, right? Like
Yeah,
that kind of weaponry never gets mentioned at all. It doesn't even show up in the games. It doesn't even show up in like the stuff like, you know, Fall of Reach or First Strike or all the other Halo books that fans adore, right? So then, like, why even bring it up?
I mean, isn't that what Wikipedia is most? It's just tertiary information. Like
Well,
this, I don't
Wikipedia
think this
has,
was never directly said,
well,
but
like Wikipedia has a lot of tertiary information, but Wikipedia also offers like pretty useful behind the scenes information as well.
of like where it came from.
Yeah, like, you know, how, you know, explaining that device, which in actuality was an ice cream maker.
Yeah, which I mean, technically not anymore.
Yeah, it got reused in The Mandalorian, right?
Exactly, and I mean, we could probably do an episode just about that of like how I guess just fan service and like the difference. I mean, obviously we want to remain positive, but like the fan service differences between what the Mandalorian did versus what the Rise of Skywalker attempted. And I thoroughly enjoyed the Rise of Skywalker as well as its kind of like fan servicey stuff.
I
But
still really prefer The
how
Last Jedi.
yeah, but just how the Mandalorian went about its additions was just so I don't it's not just creative, but
Heartful?
yeah, it was fans creating something as if it was like a fan film.
Yeah,
Because obviously you have Dave Filoni and you have John Favreau who are both fans of their own right.
yeah.
But
It
I
doesn't.
guess it
Fan
it doesn't
film,
play it doesn't play on the emotions, I guess.
fan film doesn't bring to mind the same kind of comparisons because normally when you see a fan film, it's especially Star Wars fan films, is usually just them trying to show off special effects without this regard for um, character.
I mean, I've seen a few of them. Bucketheads is one that really comes to mind.
But like, you know, like for all the people talk about how cool Scene 38 Reimagined is, and it's a very cool fight scene. Like a lot of the movement, a lot of the stuff they depict doesn't seem to jive that well with the actual character, so to say. Like we know that people like it because, you know, in the original movie, neither David Prost or um, oh,
Alec Guinness.
Alec Guinness. Why did his name suddenly escape me? Neither of them had a sword fight at all. So they, you know, they just had to do what they
Yeah,
could.
and the tank of Vader that you got in Rogue One, you you were able to sort of see go up against. I guess not no longer a prime Obi-Wan, but one that you would assume still at least knows a little bit of how to fight.
But like the problem is that I actually, in terms of like the way the characters had evolved from what we've seen later on in the prequels, I prefer the original scene better because, it shows that Vader has learned his lesson, hence the extra line about him being the master now. He lost hard to Obi-Wan because he let his rage blind him and play into Obi-Wan's strength, which is defensive fighting.
It's also...
So by keeping his head cool instead of just thrashing his sword around like a madman, like we see in the reimagined version, that's how he was really putting Obi-Wan on the ropes, right?
And I think you've also said before, it's like just how the fights kind of play out are very like
Where
samurai-esque, where it's like each move you make needs to be precise or you're dead.
it's not so much also precise as much as you can't do the same kind of like half acid movements that you might be able to pull off with other weapons because of like the sheer, like as we discussed, kendo, which heavily inspired the original trilogy's sword fighting. Like you're with that sword style, you're dealing with a sword that's pretty freaking heavy. Like katanas are like heavier than a lot of the double-handed swords that you see knights use.
Yeah, they're like 8 pounds, right?
Yeah, I think those were on the heavier scale, but yeah. I'll look it up briefly while we continue talking. But yeah, so...
Yeah. Like, I mean, one perfect example of kind of that, not necessarily fight style, but just outcome is in Rebels, like the final fight between Maul and older Obi-Wan.
Yeah, that
was only like 3 or 4 moves and he's done. I mean, that scene has been heavily like broken down as like, yeah, this is like the epitome of lightsaber fights that feel heavily referencing old samurai movies.
Yeah. Okay, I'm looking up the sword thing. I think I might have overstated it by saying 8 pounds. That might have been another sword that I mistaken for the heaviest swords.
I mean, lightsabers are, like, canonically, how heavy are they when ignited?
Apparently, Lucas wanted them to be heavy.
The hilt weight differs from lightsaber to lightsaber, but they would have weighed between 1 and 3 pounds.
Apparently, big medieval swords normally were 3 pounds, and those are like the big two-handed medieval swords too. And katanas were roughly the same weight.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I mean, you could also train. I mean,
swords are meant to be lightweight weapons. That's a big misconception. Like that's I know the Star Wars thing, but annoying thing, fantasy. Well, if you want like badass warriors and have them all inclusive, like make the girl the archer and make the dude the sword fighter because of some weird belief that shooting a bow is a more dainty, feminine thing, which it is not.
I think it's more like broad strength, kind of masculinity kind of thing. It's like, oh, the man can get down and dirty while she has to be away from the distance, stupid. Which is
if you were really as married to realism as you claim you would be, you'd probably have the really buff dude be the archer because
he can pull the whole weight of that bow and fire it a good distance.
Yeah, a long bow had 150 pounds of draw. You'd have to put your whole body into that. One time, back when I was still lifting weights, when I visited Scotland at a castle, a longbowman briefly let me try to pull the weight, and I nearly threw out my back.
Like I've seen like interviews with like actual archers, and they're like, yeah, I have a 150-pound bow. I can fire it maybe like 5 times before I'm done for the day.
Longbowmen practice for so long that literally one of their arms was longer than. You can identify a longbowman by his skeleton when you're doing archaeological digs.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because it's not just the sheer weight of it, but how often they had to do it and how quickly they had to do it. A good longbowman would literally get.
Which arm would it be? The draw arm?
The draw arm, I believe, would be the shorter one, because all the muscle bunching up on it would literally hinder its growth because you're starting from the age of 7.
Right.
Right to the point, and they like a good longbowman could get like anywhere between 6 to a dozen shots a minute, if I recall correctly. And they're doing that for a while because longbowmen were basically medieval artillery.
Wow.
Like the Battle of Agincourt, which everyone talks about for, the one of the best demonstrations of the longbow. The longbowmen literally ran out of bows. I mean, not out of bows. They literally ran out of arrows. Those guys were literally firing like 70,000 arrows a minute because it was like 5-6 of the army was all longbowmen. So you had like a few, like 10,000 longbowmen just firing, like 6 to a dozen arrows a minute. So there was literally tens of thousands of arrows raining down every poor Frenchies. So, long story short, looping back to what we're talking about, it would make sense for, you can have like the smaller, daintier character be the sword fighter. Oh, and also another thing, rapiers are actually some of the heaviest swords as well.
I figured they'd be like one of the lightest.
No, rapier is way, they're pretty heavy. By sword standards, again. Remember, not by...
Yeah, oh yeah, that's fair.
The 5-pound weight your grandma uses while she's doing jazzercise heavier than the sword.
You could still use that as a weapon.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, it would hurt.
But yeah, so like the weight and the fact that you have to get like a good cut in influenced Kendo's fighting style, and which in turn inspired lightsaber style because George Lucas was a big samurai movie fan. So I like that more than the more batshit crazy rage-fueled pumped up force trick fight that we got in Scene 38 Imagine. And it was like, those guys, and they very much cared about their craft, but they were just approaching it in a different direction from how I think it should have been approached in.
Oh yeah, I mean,
where it's like they wanted to show a rage-filled, violent, aggressive Vader,
which is always fun.
Which is fun, yeah, but I still like the original scene better. So yeah, wait, how did we get to that conversation?
We've gone for what? Huh?
How did we get to that part?
I have no idea.
Huh.
But I think that's probably how most of these podcasts might go. It's just
we were talking about population densities.
Yeah. We ended off on lightsabers.
Then we talked about the short time frame of Revenge of the Sith.
Dude, when you have two people with ADD and ADHD, it's going to be hard to track where the conversation even started.
I don't have ADHD.
I mean, I do.
Yeah, true.
If anything, I'm the one that kind of shifts us in a different direction. I mean, I think we got a pretty good conversation out of that.
Yeah, we did.
I'm excited to see where we keep going with this. I hope to anyone who's still with us at this point who hasn't already turned it off, thank you for sticking around. And we're going to try to keep going with this. We're going to try to continue on with the PorgCast. Just two porgs, just two porgs, just kind of finding any ounce of conversation we can squeezing any little bit of fun that we can get out of Star Wars.
Until we're dead. On the inside. And that's the one that matters.
I'm excited to see where we go, though.
Yeah,
I guess we're
pissed off a lot of people by saying that you liked Rise of Skywalker. I liked Last Jedi. Probably made a lot of people mad.
I don't care. I mean, like what you want. I mean, we could probably do an entire episode on that, but the amount of stuff we've written down to talk about, we've got enough episodes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're going to end it off. So, to all those that are still with us, thank you so much for watching the PorgCast, and may the Force be with you.